One thing people are going to do in 2025 is cancel a beauty brand. So today we're exploring something that's often discussed but rarely analyzed in depth: the rise and the fall of beauty brands. We're talking about scandals, bad behavior, and beauty community exile. Welcome back to Cody J Uncensored, the podcast where we take a closer look at the beauty industry, peel back the layers, and dive deep into what's really going on behind the scenes. I'm your resident pro MUA and beauty expert, Cody J. So for starters, beauty brands are constantly evolving. Sometimes they rise to iconic statuses, and other times they fall into obscurity due to marketing blunders, controversial actions, and outright scandals. While many beauty companies have managed to stay relevant for decades, others have crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny, influencer mishaps, and missteps in strategy. So today we're going to take a closer look at some of the most well-known beauty brands that once dominated our beauty industry, only to face challenges that led to their either decline or complete straight-up cancellation. So buckle up, we're about to unpack the stories of brands that went from rising stars to out of the spotlight. First up, we're talking about Too Faced Cosmetics. Now, I used Too Faced Cosmetics many years ago, and after I found out a couple things: one, their interactions with Nikki tutorials and just a lot of the things that the owners at that time had said, I was like, nah. I remember specifically I made a video, I think it was the Born This Way foundation that I used, and I was like, after hearing X, Y, and Z, nope, in the trash can it went, and I've never used a product from them ever again. So first up, a little history. So Too Faced Cosmetics came onto the beauty scene back in 1998, and they were created by Jared Blandino and Jeremy Johnson. They were known for their, what some people called fun, girly aesthetic, and their cheeky product names like their well-known Better Than Sex mascara. They were a favorite beauty brand for a while among makeup lovers, and their beauty products became cult favorites. Too Faced was all about being playful and creating products that made beauty fun. But by 2018, things really began to shift. The brand, which was once a very well-loved beauty community staple, found itself in hot water after a series of, I guess you could call them, missteps. One of the most notable controversies that Too Faced had came when the founders were accused of mistreating employees, and then allegations surfaced about their lack of inclusivity in the brand's product line. Too Faced's failure to innovate and cater to the diverse needs of their customer base really began to become noticeable. So they stuck with their signature products. They were trying their best to rely on nostalgia rather than basically evolving with the times. And this failure to keep up with changing trends and societal evolution left them in a position where their once loyal fans were slowly drifting away and spending their money elsewhere, and that left the brand a little behind. Shortly after that, there was another whole scandal surrounding their Born This Way foundation, which I mentioned briefly earlier, and while the product itself was very popular, many people found the brand's limited shade range pretty offensive and out of touch with the growing demand for diversity in the beauty industry. So for many, it was essentially a turning point, a pivoting point that was meant to signal that, Too Faced was not just growing with the times, they just didn't care. And in an industry where inclusivity was becoming the new standard, which it should have been a very long time ago, mind you, their struggles with that, issue with diversity just put them on the back burner to most people. And I'm probably going to say it a few times throughout this episode, but, I've always said that I really don't believe in cancel culture. I believe in people being held accountable, and there's a massive difference. And unfortunately, so many people put those two concepts or topics or phrases like hand in hand, like it's synonymous, and it's not. Cancel culture is just saying, you're done, bye, we're moving on, we're protesting, blah, blah, blah. And I do think there is a time and a place for protesting and calling people out. But when, and this is not about Too Faced or anyone specific in this episode, just a general statement, when people actually take accountability for their actions, whether it's creators, influencers, brands, etc., and they actually make changes and they're actually doing what they should have been doing but are now doing it for whatever reason, give them a moment to genuinely change. Things are not going to change overnight, mind you, but give them a chance to change. What I don't like is seeing people cancel someone or something, and that something or someone, whatever, is doing everything that they, again, should have already been doing, but are now at least making the strides to do, regardless of what the reason is. Like, they're doing what you asked for. They're doing what you demanded, and it's still not good enough. That's what I don't like, because then you're being a hypocrite. So that's just my little soapbox with that. Next up on our list, we're going to be talking about Becca Cosmetics. Now, I've never personally used Becca Cosmetics. There really hasn't been anything about them that has been appealing to me personally, but I do know a lot of people love their iconic champagne pop highlighter. So that was created in collaboration with Jaclyn Hill, who, if you're watching this, or I guess listening to this, you know who that is. But if you don't, she was a very well-known OG beauty influencer. She's had a bunch of her own scandals, but who doesn't? So Becca Cosmetics, they enjoyed a massive rise to, I guess, fame, if you will, in the 2010s, early 2010s. And they were dominating the highlighter game back then. And especially around like the 2016 time when everyone was like obsessed with that over the top highlighting, glow moment. Hello, that was perfect for them. But anyway, before we get ahead of ourselves or myself. So that brand was basically seen as like an innovator. They created what some people considered high quality products that were ahead of their time. And their products were known for their inclusive shade ranges, their formulas, and their ability to give you that perfect dewy glow. But in 2021, Becca Cosmetics announced that it would be shutting down. So let's talk about what happened. So part of the issue was that they heavily relied on just a few hero products. And if you don't know, hero products are basically like a brand's bread and butter. So for them, it was Champagne Pop, their highlighter. It was part of their huge success. But overall, their product line lacked the kind of depth and variety to keep the momentum going and keep people coming back. It was almost like they were just a trend, essentially. And as you all know, when a trend dies, so does the creator of it typically. And in this case, it was Becca Cosmetics. So when the highlighter craze finally started to die down, Becca Cosmetics really struggled to find their new identity in this super saturated beauty market. So they never really quite found a replacement for that Champagne Pop, not only the product, but the moment that they created for themselves. And really, without a strong product lineup to support them, the brand died off. And of course, at the same time, when you have the rise of brands like Fenty Beauty by Rihanna, which revolutionized the inclusivity game in the industry, that something like that did not help Becca Cosmetics. So despite being what most considered an inclusive brand, Becca Cosmetics' fall from grace came as consumers basically just gravitated towards other brands and ones that had more varied product ranges and for a more robust presence in the market. And when a brand like Becca Cosmetics, with all of its potential, just couldn't keep up, it was only a matter of time before they were gone. And that's what happened. Now let's talk about a brand that I feel like people just hated from the beginning because of who owns it, and that is Kim Kardashian's KKW Beauty. So this brand launched in 2017, and it was a huge moment with Kim Kardashian at the helm of it all. She obviously has a massive following and influence in the world, but especially when it comes to the beauty world. And she has managed to build a brand that combined her personal aesthetic and her charisma with a carefully crafted mass market appeal brand, and that is KKW Beauty. Their first product was her contour kits. It sold out almost immediately, and it really just kind of told everyone that, or proved to everyone that Kim's influence was not a joke. Love her or hate her, she had power. And she was playing the game of celebrity-driven beauty brands better than basically everyone else at that time. And there are still many people nowadays that just don't like the concept of celebrity-owned beauty brands because most people think that it's just a cash grab. And in my opinion and my experience, many of them are. Don't get me wrong, there are ones that, like Rare Beauty or Fenty Beauty, that are definitely not cash grabs, that do very, very well, that are very mass appealing, and people agree that they love it. So it's definitely not like a one size fits all, notion, the whole celebrity owned beauty brand thing. Just want to say that. So again, the brand launched in 2017, but it was by 2021 that KKW Beauty had announced a huge rebrand and a shift in the direction that they want to take their company. The brand, I feel like, was struggling with its identity. And after Kim Kardashian's very public divorce from Kanye West, it was very clear that her personal life and honestly her public image were influencing the brand's perception, which a lot of people did not like. But this wasn't the only problem. So KKW Beauty faced criticism for being way too similar to existing beauty brands and having a very limited product offering. It's boring and it's bland, honestly. But the brand did not manage to diversify or expand in the way that it needed to remain relevant, and a lot of people called that out from the very beginning. In my opinion, I've never used her products, so it's not about the actual products themselves. To me, I never used the brand because the brand bored the hell out of me. It was the most muted, neutral, just bland. Like there was no personality in the brand. There was nothing. And for me, I love a good colorful moment, whether it's the makeup, the packaging, the brand identity. And this just was the polar opposite of that for me. I was just never excited for it, so I never tried it. With that being said though, Kim Kardashian's decision to basically put her brand on pause to focus on other business ventures like Skin, which is her skincare line, really also showed that her beauty line wasn't a priority. And in a world where there are so many beauty brands, you need to be at the top or you're going to end up really, really quickly at the bottom. And that's kind of what happened. The people, consumers, creators, influencers who initially flocked to her brand, to review something or try something that was a hot topic, they felt like it essentially lacked authenticity, and again created that cash grab notion, and people lost their excitement for it. Many people also started to question whether it was more about her personal brand getting more attention than it was about a product that they actually loved, and it didn't do well at the end of the day. So the rebrand scaled back the products and they pivoted to skincare, which kind of seemed to signal that KKW Beauty's time in the spotlight essentially ended. More and more celebrity beauty brands were entering the scene at this time, and her beauty empire felt less exciting and groundbreaking than it did in 2017. It definitely did not seem like it was this innovative, iconic thing like it did when it first launched. I would love to know what your thoughts are on KKW Beauty in the beginning and kind of how it crumbled. Next, we're gonna talk about Lorac Cosmetics. So if you've been in the beauty community for a while, you know that they were once a major player in the industry. They were founded in 1995 by Carol Shaw, who was a celebrity makeup artist and who basically wanted to create a line of makeup products that perform well but didn't irritate sensitive skin, which I love that because I have very sensitive skin. So this brand's eyeshadow palettes were very, very well loved by many, especially their Pro palette, which became an instant classic among working makeup artists. Their formulas were often praised for their pigmentation, their blendability, and their overall quality, which we want all of those things out of an eyeshadow palette, don't we? So it was just something that was really, again, well loved by professional makeup artists and people just purchasing products and using them. But even with that being said, they definitely lost a lot of traction quickly in like the mid 2010s as there were larger, more inclusive brands coming out that were also much more trendy, like Urban Decay, Tarte Cosmetics, and as you know, Anastasia Beverly Hills, who quickly rose to the top. Also, it didn't help that their, I guess you would call it, lackluster marketing strategy. It just basically left them in the dust. They just weren't doing what they needed to do to stay with the times, not only stay with the times, but keep growing with the times and being a key player in the industry. People said that their product releases became less exciting, and essentially when the brand failed to keep up with the shift towards an influencer-driven market, they died off. On the other hand, brands like Anastasia Beverly Hills and Tarte were partnering with major influencers to promote products, which again, at that time is when the rise of the influencer really started. And it's one of those things where, if you don't just get with the times, you don't evolve with the times, you're gonna get left in the past. And that's what happened. The market became more crowded. It became much more fast paced. They couldn't keep up. They couldn't adapt both in terms of innovative products and marketing that was needed, especially with influencer marketing, like I mentioned. It just resulted in them declining very quickly. And while their products were still considered to be very good by, again, pro MUAs and just general consumers, at the same time, the brand lost its notoriety that it once had, and it just drifted off into the abyss of beauty brands. Now, what would a recap of controversial brands be if we didn't talk about Jeffree Star Cosmetics? So let's talk about the history a little bit, because I feel like because Jeffree Star Cosmetics is still extraordinarily successful and extraordinarily popular, at the same time being extraordinarily controversial, I want to go like a little bit more in depth about this brand, because there are so many opinions about the brand owner, Jeffree Star himself, of course. So let's just start with when the brand was created. So it was founded in 2014 by Jeffree Star, who I'm sure you know who that is. So if you don't know who he is by chance, he was an internet personality. He was on MySpace. He was one of the most followed people back on MySpace. He did a bunch of funny videos on YouTube for a long time. He had his cute little dogs. He was a musician and all that good stuff. So he launched Jeffree Star Cosmetics back again in like 2014-ish, and it quickly grew to be a big heavy hitter in the beauty world. Jeffree Star Cosmetics' initial launch featured 3 of what he calls velour liquid lipsticks, and by about 2019, his brand was estimated to generate annual sales of about $100 million. He was also known for his products being vegan and cruelty-free, which appeals to typically a pretty large, audience of consumers. But this is where things get a little rocky. So Jeffree's personal history basically has been at the helm of many controversies. I mean, he himself is a controversial person and always has. And there's plenty of controversial influencers and creators and brands, all the things, which is what this podcast is even all about, of course. But he seems, in my opinion, to have more than most people, or the controversies he's been a part of they're like related to topics that are much heavier and much more, I don't know what word to use, just bad, for lack of a much better word. So starting off with something that people bring up oftentimes, and that is alleged racial remarks. So he has had a alleged past of derogatory comments about different types of minorities and women, and he's publicly apologized about them. So I'm still gonna say alleged about this because I know how the internet works, I know how he works, I know how all this works. So period. He also had a website called Lipstick. I'm not gonna say the second word. If you wanna Google it, you can, but I'm not gonna include that word in this video, obviously. So it was around 2020 where some photos from that website, which featured a lot of inappropriate symbolism, alongside other personal photos, resurfaced or came to light for a lot of people for the first time, which caused a lot of backlash. So moving forward, with that being said, in 2020, it was a little bit after 2020, there were allegations of abuse. So he had faced a lot of accusations about assault, misconduct. There were claims of paying hush money to accusers, and his attorney, of course, denied those allegations, but there were a lot of leaked documents that suggested otherwise, and a lot of people covered that topic in depth. So definitely, if you're interested in finding out more about those topics specifically, I believe Dustin Daly probably has some very in-depth videos about it. He does a pretty good job at covering things like this. So I would imagine he has videos made that really go over and like show, all the evidence and proof and whatnot of things. So check that out if that's something you want to hear more about. I don't want to get too in depth about it because, to be quite honest, the topic of like people participating in like racial remarks or discriminatory behavior, abuse, things like that, it actually makes me, just beyond uncomfortable. It makes me sick to my stomach. It makes me feel terrible because of what those topics are, what they do to people. And I'm a big proponent of inclusivity and diversity, equality. I've been part of so many groups in my lifetime, especially when I was in school, that was all about promoting equality and inclusivity and diversity. And everything I do in life, I try to mirror those things that I did when I was younger, which was to make people feel included and loved and belong to something. I don't know, that it gets me like flustered because it genuinely upsets me that people say and do horrible things, especially in 2025, that are just so egregious and disgusting and just beyond. It's just beyond sometimes what people do and have done. You know what I mean? That being said, let's move on because the topic honestly upsets me. So these controversies that were basically coupled with public feuds with other beauty influencers who were also his friends over the course of a period of time really impacted the brand's reputation. And in 2020, Morphe Cosmetics, who was a significant retail partner, cut ties with Jeffree Star and Jeffree Star Cosmetics amid a lot of mounting criticism. And, there was a huge public blowout with that essentially. And it really also changed the future for a lot of creators and brands and moments when it came to collaborating with influencers. It really also did a number on influencer marketing in general. And to kind of trail off of that, we are going to finally talk about Morphe Cosmetics. So everyone knows Morphe Cosmetics. They're especially known for two things. Their brushes, which I love them. They're amazing, amazing makeup brushes, and their collaborations with popular beauty influencers. So Morphe Cosmetics in general was established in 2008 in Los Angeles. They gained fame for, like I said, their influencer collaborations and their product range, but their strategy of partnering with prominent beauty influencers like Jeffree Star, James Charles, and Jaclyn Hill that really fueled their rapid growth in the beauty industry. But it was ultimately what kind of like took them out, if you ask me. Basically, it was like a double-edged sword. So starting off with influencer controversy. So the brand faced public scrutiny due to their associations with influencers that were involved in scandals like Jeffree and like James. The brand faced a lot of public scrutiny from consumers, creators, and other influencers due to their associations with those influencers that were involved in scandals that also, those scandals included accusations of misconduct and inappropriate behavior, like I kind of mentioned, a moment ago. And in 2020, Morphe ended their relationship with Jeffree Star amid those allegations of alleged racism and abuse. And it was in 2021 when they cut their ties with James Charles following, again, accusations of inappropriate interactions, and with him, allegedly with minors. And, those were two creators or two influencers that were driving so much revenue for Morphe. It gained them so much popularity. It gained Morphe so much popularity. So imagine what happened to them once two of their biggest hitters were no longer working with them, or they were no longer working with those influencers. It ultimately led to a significant amount of financial struggles. And it was in January of 2023 that Morphe's parent company called Forma Brands filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, citing that challenges in the influencer-driven market and the changing in consumer preferences led to that. The company owed significant amounts of money to influencers, including allegedly around $2 million to Jaclyn Hill and allegedly around $1.4 million to Jeffree Star, based on what I was able to find on Wikipedia. If those numbers are wrong, they're wrong. That's why I said allegedly. You can do the research for yourself. I also actually had a very small partnership with Morphe, not like a collab or anything like that, but I actually ended up receiving every single document from that Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And I eventually had to reach out to the attorney and ask them, like, please stop sending these documents. I have received hundreds and hundreds of documents from them, and I was so sick of it. They're basically like, well, we just need you to, be in the know, because if you choose to sue them for them owing you money, like, you have to file against them as a creditor. And I'm just like, bro, it's not worth the time, energy, or the money to get any money from them. So I was like, just drop me. Just drop me. I don't want to hear about it anymore. So thankfully after that, I didn't get more documentation because it was very annoying. By August 2024, though, Morphe ended up closing all of their UK stores, to my knowledge at least, to focus on their online presence, which most beauty brands really are online nowadays, but it definitely is still a benefit to have stores, brick and mortar stores. But this essentially reflected more of like a broader shift in the overall retail landscape and the brand's need to adapt. So with all of this being said, I know it's a lot of information, a lot of talking, but what can we learn from these brands and their history and both their successes and their failures? At the end of the day, the beauty industry is an incredibly volatile place. And in today's world, it's not just about creating a great product. Brand longevity requires innovation, like brand new, really cool products. inclusivity more than anything, strategic marketing, and staying connected with their audiences. When brands fall into the trap of being too comfortable or out of touch with current social climate or trends or just the overall, who their audience is, the people spending their money on their products. And as we know, brands can quickly lose that relevance and just drift off into nothing. So the rise and fall of brands like Too Faced and Becca, KK Beauty, Morphe, Jeffree Star Cosmetics, all the brands we talked about above, it teaches us that success in the industry is not guaranteed no matter how strong their initial appeal is. I mean, I've also seen some indie brands that have skyrocketed to notoriety, I guess, or success, and are no longer here. Like, that is the perfect example of it. Influencer-based brands skyrocket. Everyone wants them. They're the hot thing. And then again, shut down. So whether it's mismanagement or lack of inclusivity or just simply not evolving fast enough to keep up with consumer demand, the beauty world just moves so fast. I don't feel like people realize how fast it really moves. And that spotlight can disappear as fast as it showed up. So I would love to know from you, which brands do you think lost a lot of their positive trajectory or the desire because of their actions, and which do you think have been unfairly, quote unquote, canceled? Thank you so much for tuning into Cody J Uncensored. Until next time, stay curious, stay beautiful, and don't let anyone censor you.